It is the most wonderful time of the year. That means it is Christmas time, and that means it is time to watch Die Hard. Since it is the year 2016 and you are watching a video on the movie Die Hard on YouTube, it almost goes without saying that you probably know that Die Hard is widely considered one of, if not the best action movie of all time. Certainly one of the best, if not the best action movie of the 80s. And there's a reason for that. It's such a wonderfully crafted movie with great performances, with a great sense of humor, with a great villain that all comes together to make for a very exciting and thrilling action experience. For me personally, I think I would say it is the best action movie of all time. Now, when I say that, I don't really like picking favorites or best of because you're comparing things that typically there's a lot to compare where it is kind of apples and oranges. They're both fruits, but they're not the same thing. So if I'm comparing Die Hard to Terminator 2, that's kind of weird to me, and I don't like having to pick which one is better between the two things because they're both the best at what they're trying to do. With all that said, when I think just straight action movie, no sci-fi, time travel, superhero, any of that stuff, when I just think straight action movie, Die Hard is the one that comes to mind as the quintessential example of what this genre can do. When you don't put in a bunch of extra stuff, when you don't have big CGI, when you just go bare bones, straight action movie, Die Hard is the one that comes to mind. There's a reason that this has kind of become possibly the most copied action movie of all time. If you've watched Screen Junkie's Honest trailer about it, they do a compilation where they just cut through all of the movies that are Die Hard on a train, Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a fill in the blank, and there's endless movies that rip off this formula of the lone action hero in a confined space that has to take out a whole bunch of bad guys and free the hostages. That formula works, but it's never been done as well as it was done the very first time. In so many cliches, so many templates, so many examples of how you do action movie come straight from this movie for a very simple reason. I believe that this movie has possibly the best script for any action movie of all time. Now, there's all kinds of directions you can praise about this movie, about Bruce Willis in his prime, Alan Rickman as his best villain that he ever played, and he's played a lot of great villains. You can go down the list of all the reasons that this is a great movie, but I think the script is really where this movie comes together, and it's truly unique. So the thing that prompted me making this video is I got to go see this movie in the theater, a local theater, 2 days ago. And watching it in theater with a room full of people excited, just locked in attention, the theater experience, not at home where you can get distracted, where you'll pull your phone out, but just watching it with a room full of people, immediately it just struck me how perfectly paced and structured this film is. Like, it starts off and every line of dialogue is setting something up that pays off in the future. Every action that happens has ramifications for what's coming ahead. The little moments and action sequences that make them exciting aren't people shooting bullets. That's easy to do. You've got 100 Steven Seagal movies where he shoots 1,000 bullets, but that's not nearly as exciting as watching one guy desperately running through a hallway away from guys and trying to survive and crawling through air ducts. And as you're watching it, just the little things that were set up early on about his shoes. And the reason he doesn't have shoes on is because he doesn't like to fly. And just so perfectly crafted, small little details and moments that set something up that has huge ramifications that makes perfect sense. You just have a character, he doesn't like to fly, and someone gives him some advice. It's a conversation that would happen on a plane, so it makes sense there. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is gonna pay off later on in the movie. It doesn't feel like that. No, you're just going through the movie and simple conversation that happens on a plane. A guy feels nervous because he doesn't like to fly. The person next to him tells him his old wives' remedy, that old wives or whatever you call those, that causes you to lose the nervousness or whatever is happening with him. So he takes his shoes off. And this is a huge plot point throughout the rest of the movie, that he doesn't have shoes, and that's a vulnerability. Once again, what makes this script so great is the small details that what makes our hero seem human, what's a threat to his life, is that his feet might get hurt. And you never think about that when you're watching an action movie. I love Van Damme. I've never been watching a Van Damme movie and thought to myself, I hope his feet are okay. And that's the brilliance of this movie, that you're thinking about his feet. From the very beginning of this movie till the end of this movie, you're thinking about the lead actor's feet because it matters, because you're thinking there's glass everywhere. And it perfectly builds tension, stakes, fear, tied back to our actor's feet. That is a brilliant script. That's brilliant directing because it makes you care and feels human and grounds everything. But that's just one example of how wonderfully crafted this script is. So as the movie progresses and a guy's riding in a limousine with a limousine driver, and this sets up little elements so we can learn about our character, and he's having a conversation. You learn he's not this big charismatic guy that wants to be the life of the party. He's just a get-it-done kind of guy that kind of likes to stick to himself a little bit and talks to himself, this type of thing. You establish the character and you learn about his background so perfectly in this scene where he's just riding in a car with another guy that's so normal and grounded. And all of this is taking place as the titles are running over the front of it and the cast and everything. And this just works wonderfully to just set up the world that we're in and the set of characters and the circumstances that we're about to see. He gets to the party and he's talking to his wife's boss. Or even before this happens, he goes in and he's trying to get into the building and types in her name and her name's not there. This establishes the relationship that he has with his wife just by looking at his screen and one little line of dialogue. He goes upstairs, meets the boss, and the boss says, yeah, she's tough as nails. We wouldn't be where we are without her. Immediately, this establishes her role in the movie and why she's able to do and fits into the story the way she does later on. And all of these elements, it sets up a tension later in the movie as she's afraid that Hans Gruber is going to discover who she is. Like these little things that are set up that she's able to hide her identity, and just because their marital situation, so perfectly crafted for the movie to give tension later on. Little details. You're not thinking early on like that the fact that she's using her maiden name matters. It's just something going on that you think is building relational tension between the characters, and later on in the movie you realize this is one of the benefits of what's going on, so he can't leverage Holly against John until very late in the movie. That's so brilliant the way that is done. Likewise, playing into the way that news media tell stories, that this becomes a vulnerability because of the way news media works, where they have to reveal every detail, which is more true today than it was even back then. But you're watching the movie and it's like, that's what happens. News guys just want to tell anything they can. And because of that, they reveals the vulnerability that John McClane has, which is his wife, which Hans Gruber has access to. All of this is so perfectly crafted in it that it makes absolute logical sense as the script as to why everyone's going, while at the same time establishing these characters and who they are, their roles in the movie. This is how you craft a script. And if you talk about the action in this movie, in some ways it feels kind of quaint. The first action sequence in it is something like 20 minutes into the movie where they take over the building and then John McClane pulls the fire alarm and they come up and there's like a fight between him and another guy and it goes into a stairwell. Well, it feels kind of quaint. It's just a hand-to-hand fight. It takes 20 minutes to get to this. By modern day standards, you're supposed to start off the movie with a big gigantic explosion and some mega action sequence that is totally memorable. But this movie doesn't do this. This movie instead establishes characters, and then we get to our first sequence, and it feels kind of, like I said, quaint. It feels small scale. It doesn't feel all that impactful. In many senses, it's not all that memorable what happens. In fact, what's more memorable about this sequence is he kills the guy and then writes on his chest, "Now I've got a machine gun," something that everybody remembers that line if they've seen the movie. And so, because you care about the characters so much more in those little moments in an action movie that you think the action is great in it, but you remember the character moments more so. This is what happens when you craft a movie perfectly. And you don't have to have big spectacle. A sequence where a guy fights in a hallway and then writes on the shirt is so much more powerful and memorable. Once again, in the movie, this establishes a rivalry between him and the brother of the guy that he kills, which has huge importance for the rest of the movie, huge ramifications, where the big muscle guy that's supposed to help Hans Gruber is now emotionally compromised and out for a vendetta, which has consequences for the bad guys. All of this ties in perfectly, and it's so wonderfully crafted, which I'll keep saying because it's true. As you watch the movie, paying attention to all the ways something little pays off. Just thinking about the scene where Hans Gruber and John McClane are there together, And you can just see them. John McClane is the detective. He's trying to figure out if this guy's telling the truth or not. And so he's looking around for little signs, looking for names on the wall. And likewise, Hans Gruber, being brilliant, is reading names on the wall to be able to say things, playing off of each other, just the way a detective would do this, a character that's using what he has. He's not established as a martial artist that's the best fighter. No, he's a guy that gets thrown around, throws a guy down a stairwell and falls down with him. That's how he takes out the bad guys. He throws so much of it is through chance, like he's just in the right place at the right time. He's smart about things. He's not taking a room full of guys. This is how you craft a movie. A normal guy that's in a situation above himself, just being smart and throwing the guys with a plan off of the plan. Along with the story being crafted and little moments being crafted so nicely, the characters are handled in a way, both in the script as well as in the direction, that just grounds all of them in an unusually realistic way for a movie like this. So little moments like John McClane's running through a hallway and there's a picture of a naked lady on the wall and he looks over at it. Like most guys would probably do. He runs back through the hallway with guys chasing him, and he actively has to not look at it even though he's being chased by guys with guns. There's about to be a shootout later in the movie. A guy runs up behind a case and grabs a candy bar because they have a few minutes before people are going to get there. That feels kind of stupid. It doesn't feel very cinematic because in movies, the way things are handled, that people are just like in the moment, in the scene. But a real person in a real situation where they're sitting there and there's candy right here, they'll just start eating candy and like, or they're coming and they'll pull up their gun. That's what I would do. I mean, that's the sort of stuff real people do. And you see that in this movie. There's little moments where where Hans Gruber's kind of dropped out of the building and it cuts away to the police chief going, I hope that's not one of the hostages. And then he falls down to his death. This movie, that shouldn't work. That should be an awkward, cuts the tone of the movie and cuts the tension there. But it works in this movie because throughout the whole deal, that's kind of what's been going on. These little types of comments that people make are what you keep seeing in the movie, where people act and say things that real people would do and would say. Even to the level of there's a high-rise building with a bunch of rich people in the 80s, and you got a guy on cocaine that thinks he can fix everything in the character of Ellis. Tries to seal the deal with the terrorists and gets himself killed. Well, it's actually kind of funny. I don't know how I missed this. Well, I guess I know how I missed this growing up. I didn't do cocaine. I didn't know anyone that did cocaine, as far as I know. And so I never picked up on the fact for years and years that Ellis is doing cocaine throughout the whole movie. Didn't pick up on the fact that he had just done cocaine right before he goes in to talk to Hans Gruber. But even that, why is this guy acting so crazy, doing such weird stuff? Well, he's hopped up on cocaine. Of course he's acting crazy and going to do weird stuff on cocaine. But what makes this movie truly thrilling at its core is the simple fact is that it understands conflict. So right from the get-go, you established a relational conflict between John McClane and his wife. So you care about them on a very relatable way that you can see where real people would be in the middle of this conflict. Then, of course, terrorist heist guys show up. There's now an enemy conflict going on. They shoot the glass out. He doesn't have shoes on. So now that there's a conflict with danger to his physical body, his feet get injured. So that was a conflict of if I run, my feet hurt. If I don't run, people die. There's constant little moments. There's a scene where he has to lower himself through an elevator shaft or air conditioning shaft, and his gun is just holding there. And so he's in an environment that is now a threat to him. There's a moment of conflict, and all of this is happening while there's a ticking clock of bad guys chasing after him. All of these little things have a new conflict established in the situation that really matters. Right there, you're going, oh, that strap's not going to hold. That strap's not going to hold, but he better get out of there. And right before this, he had to go through an air conditioner vent deal, has to put a gun in there, and you just look at it and you go, oh man, that is not, you're going through that. The conflict of it, the tension of it, you feel that immediately. You have Ellis going in trying to save the day and not being a great, brilliant guy actually for dealing with terrorist heist guys. You see the now guilt conflict that John McClane is facing as he's like, I could have saved that guy by turning myself in, but no, I shouldn't have done that because I couldn't have saved everybody else. Conflict added in, a new layer of it. Throughout the whole second half of the movie, there's conflict between John McClane and authority, where the authorities don't trust him, they don't believe him, and they think he's messing things up. That's an added conflict going on inside of the movie. So throughout the the whole thing, there's these little moments. He's on the top of a building trying to save everybody. He shoots a gun to try and get them to go down fast enough because there's a literal ticking clock before explosives go off. By doing this, he starts a new conflict with the crazy FBI guys that want to shoot anybody on the top. They crafted once again a conflict where he does something to get them off the building, which creates the next conflict. He knows the building's going to blow up, so the next conflict is he needs to jump off of this building. Ties something around himself. He goes, this is not a good idea, but blowing up is a worse idea. Jumps off the building, hits the glass. Though he knows the rope's going to burn up, so he has to get through the glass as quick as possible. Another conflict. He swings through the window, kicking it with his cut up feet. Conflict. Goes through the window. Thing from the top of the building falls down, starts sliding backwards. Added conflict. So you keep having these moments. Then right around the same time in the movie, his reporter guy decides to go to the McClane household, reveals the true identity of these characters. This is an added conflict. But even as these moments are happening, all of it makes sense. Why is reporter guy trying to get the story? Because that's what reporter guys do. That's what they're supposed to do. That's his job. He's not really a villain in the story. He's just doing his job. The police characters, the FBI characters are overplayed as dumb and anti-John McClane, but at the same time, they don't know who he is. We know who he is because we're watching him. They're just on the ground level, and they know there's a guy in the building, probably a good guy, and then he blows up part of the building. Why would they trust that guy? So there's a conflict there, but it's not totally unreasonable. You understand where police guys are coming from throughout all of this. And so then these conflicts that keep being set up and leading to the final piece, news guy reveals it. So then Hans Gruber, who would be vulnerable, it would be very vulnerable at this point in time to John McClane just running up and shooting him. He's got Holly. Because this is a wonderfully crafted script that we get the most personal conflict in this final moment of it. And once again, because they've crafted a movie that's set at Christmas time at a Christmas party, so there's tape everywhere, so John McClane can walk up, put a gun on his back. Conflict. He shoots Hans Gruber. Hans Gruber goes out the window. He grabs her bracelet. Conflict. All of these wonderful moments, perfectly crafted throughout the whole thing, that it's thrilling, it's exciting, and it's little things. She's got a bracelet on. He doesn't have shoes on. Gravity works, so he's sliding backwards. And that's what makes this movie fun, exciting. It doesn't need big CGI spectacle. I mean, you've got a building that blows up, and you've got like a tank thing at one point in time. But for the most part, these are really, really small-scale action sequences that you care about because they establish stakes, characters you care about, and conflict throughout all of it. Little challenges that he has to keep overcoming to move forward throughout our story. And that's kind of what makes this movie work incredibly well. On the negative side, it's only a 99.999% perfect film. So we'll round up. We're going to give this 100%. But I will say that the FBI characters are too dumb. They're too stereotypically bureaucratic guys that want to be the hero. Likewise, the police chief guy, he's a little bit too dumb and untrusting and says some dumb stuff. The story plays a little bit too much into he's all alone, John McClane with his Twinkie-eating cop buddy on the ground and everyone else against him. And to do that, to establish that, it makes the cops a little bit too dumb, FBI a little bit too bureaucratic nonsense guys. And it doesn't need to. If you remove that from the movie, the plot still makes sense. The logic still holds. Hans Gruber's plan still holds. All the conflict's still there. So I'm only going to ding it 0.001% for that. So we still got my rating for this movie, of course, is a perfect 10 out of 10. This is a great action movie. This is a case study that screenwriters and Hollywood producers need to go back to. They need to study what made this movie work and use that for future movies, not just the template. We don't need just Die Hard at the White House, Die Hard in London, Die Hard on a train, Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard on a boat bus. Like, we don't need just the template. We need this idea of crafting little moments of real characters and real situations, intention and conflict set up logically throughout the whole thing. Not trying to outdo spectacle and trying to come up with a clever thing to blow up the next thing and this CGI thing, and not all that. We've seen enough of that, and it hasn't been better than Die Hard. Because it's just spectacle, it's special effects, which are awesome when used right, but they don't make up for a good script, great characters, perfect directing. That's what makes this movie work. That's what makes this movie the best. But that's just my opinion, and I don't want to just talk about Die Hard. I want to talk about Die Hard with you. So tell me in the comment section, what do you think is the best action movie of all time? You can throw stuff like Terminator 2 in there if you want. I don't say that just because that's more sci-fi action to me, but what do you think? Let's have a great conversation about it down in the comment section. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. It means the world to me that you'd watch these videos. I love to talk movies. I love to talk about movies with you, so join in the conversation by clicking that subscribe button and coming back. Thank you for watching. I got terrible news for you guys. The third Gruber brother, Franz Gruber, wants to get his grubby hands all over your stuff, so he's broken into your house. There's one way to stop him. You gotta click that subscribe button and watch some of these other videos. If you do that, we can stop him from doing evil. We can stop the Gruber family once and for all. Join in the fight. Watch these other videos. Thank you for helping me stop the Gruber family from being evil.